I want you to imagine, just for a moment, the sheer physical scale of the upcoming artificial intelligence boom. We hear a ton about algorithms and software, but powering all of those data centers takes a monumental amount of electricity in the real world. 8 gigawatts. That is the massive, updated expectation for large load power demand by 2032 for NextEra Energy. It's an absolutely staggering upward revision, and it is entirely driven by the booming energy needs of AI and data centers. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating look at how America's largest energy company is aggressively pivoting to become the primary engine behind the AI revolution. We'll explore how they're fundamentally reshaping their entire business to meet this historic moment. We're going to break down the strategies, the financials, and a historic mega-merger that is literally sending shockwaves through the entire utility industry. It's going to be a great one.
Okay, let's dive into this and run through our roadmap for today. We'll start with number 1, the AI power boom, before moving into number 2, a strong second quarter. Then we'll look at 3, Florida's energy engine, 4, the Dominion mega merger, and wrap up with number 5, what comes next.
Let's get right into section 1, the AI power boom, looking specifically at hyperscalers and the grid. To really understand the macroeconomic forces driving the energy sector right now, we have to look at the demand curve, because it is frankly unlike anything we've seen in modern history. NextEra Energy Resources is positioning itself as one of the very few companies with a sheer scale to serve hyperscalers, those giant tech companies building out the AI infrastructure. They aren't just offering one product here, they have a whole suite of solutions. Right now, they're in advanced negotiations for federal hubs in Texas and Pennsylvania. They're also actively securing turbine slots for 4 gigawatts of new combined cycle gas plants to make sure they have reliable, always-on power. And maybe the most exciting part? They've identified 6 gigawatts of small modular reactor, or SMR, co-location opportunities. SMRs are these advanced, smaller nuclear reactors that are built in factories and shipped to sites, so they're way faster and cheaper to deploy than traditional nuclear plants. Thanks to this aggressive strategy, they're expanding their pipeline to roughly 40 hubs by the end of 2026. What's really interesting about this setup is how AI, which feels invisible, requires massive physical infrastructure in the real world. NextEra is leveraging their existing nuclear sites, places that already have heavy security, grid connections, and cooling infrastructure all set up to co-locate these small modular reactors. They're finding some highly innovative ways to generate the clean, massive baseload power that the tech giants are just desperate for right now. Moving on to section 2, a strong second quarter, and breaking down the financial highlights for 2026. So all these macro energy demands are really just theories until you see how they actually translate into the company's financial report card. And I gotta say, that report card is looking exceptionally robust. If we look at adjusted earnings per share, which is basically a company's profit divided by its outstanding shares, adjusted for one-time costs, we see a jump from $1.05 in the second quarter of 2025 to $1.15 in the second quarter of 2026. That is a very healthy 9.5% year-over-year growth. Actually, in a heavily regulated utility market, pushing nearly double-digit earnings growth shows highly effective operational execution. But, financial growth on paper means nothing if you aren't building the physical foundation for tomorrow. NextEra is backing up those earnings with massive physical expansion. In just this quarter alone, they actively added 3.6 gigawatts of new renewables and storage projects to their backlog. They are constantly securing the pipeline that's going to fuel their earnings growth well into the 2030s. Now for section 3, Florida's energy engine, and how they're powering the 14th largest economy. Zooming into the micro level for a second, Florida Power & Light, which is NextEra's core utility, is tasked with powering an economy that is now a $1.8 trillion annual engine. That makes Florida the 14th largest economy in the world. And they're definitely not resting on their laurels. They continue to own and operate more solar and storage than any other utility in America. They're literally physically transforming the landscape of Florida to make sure the state has clean, reliable power to support its booming population and industrial base. So the crucial point is that this infrastructure growth translates directly into consumer benefits. It's just a highly effective model. The utility maintains top decile reliability, actually coming in more than 60% better than the national average. But they do that while keeping residential bills roughly 30% below the national average. When you offer highly reliable, cheap power, people notice, and that is exactly why they added over 90,000 new customers year over year. All right, Section 4. the Dominion mega merger, focusing on expanding the footprint. Let's expand back out to the megatrend here, a historic corporate merger with Dominion Energy that is going to fundamentally reshape the American utility landscape. Whenever a massive merger is announced, the first question is always, well, what happens to the customer? NextEra is answering that immediately. They're putting the customer first by proposing a staggering $2.25 billion in total bill credits for Dominion Energy customers. By heavily subsidizing rates right out of the gate, they are aiming to bring that exact same low-cost, high-reliability model that worked so well in Florida over to Virginia and the Carolinas. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why they are doing the deal. When you place their standalone expectations right next to the combined targets of a newly merged company, it becomes incredibly clear that the goal is accelerating operations across a much wider map.
The data here tells a really powerful story. Their operations expand from one core utility state up to 4. Their long-term adjusted EPS target bumps up from a solid 8% plus to a highly attractive 9% plus. Their rate-based growth jumps from 10% to 11%. And, crucially for investors who really value stability, their estimated regulated business mix increases from over 70% to over 80%. The combined company isn't just bigger, the financial profile becomes way more stable while being aggressive in its growth targets.
But, merging two massive entities requires a pretty delicate operational touch. You can't just run the whole shebang from one far-off desk. Their integration plan features a dual headquarters setup in Juno Beach, Florida, and Richmond, Virginia, along with a major operational base in Kesey, South Carolina. They are purposely maintaining strong local leadership to ensure they don't lose touch with the communities they're actually serving across these 4 states.
Which brings us to Section 5. What comes next? The blueprint for America's grid.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because this combined entity is aiming to execute the largest regulated capital investment opportunity in the industry, and by a very wide margin. The stated goal here is incredibly ambitious. They expect to double the U.S.'s already largest generation fleet by 2032. You don't just plan to double the largest fleet in the country unless you are absolutely certain that the demand is there. They are scaling up massive capital to ensure they are the ones who capture that unmatched large load demand from tech giants. I want to leave you with a thought to ponder as we wrap up today. We started out by looking at that massive 8-gigawatt demand entirely driven by AI and data centers. This technology is incredibly thirsty, and it demands way more power than our current infrastructure was ever built to handle. So, is this kind of unprecedented corporate consolidation, combining massive resources, maximizing scale, and aggressively expanding clean baseload power, the ultimate blueprint for how America's grid will survive the AI revolution? It's a fascinating question, and for sure, it's one we are going to be watching very closely. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning and keep asking the big questions.